Hello everyone, we are Geeks Not Nerds. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
And today we got a message from Hazard F5.
Did we? What did he say?
Well, he wants us to talk about directly adapting source material into movies. He's talking specifically about comic books.
That sounds cool. Let's get on it.
We can run off on some other sorts of things, but
there are chairs under the ocean.
What he originally asked us to do was to name some comic stories that we like to see adapted like exactly from the page, and that was his question. What he was talking about with this comment was how sometimes when he was talking to me specifically, and he was saying sometimes when I'm reviewing things, I'll talk about like when a movie deviated from the source material and that was a good idea, and when it sticks closer to directly to the source material and when that's working, and so he was curious about things that we like to see made exactly the way they are. And I don't want to cop out on this. We're going to try to name a few we're going to try to name a few things that we like to see done more or less the way they are. But the first thing I want to say before we get into that, Vince, is I don't know that I can think of anything that directly translates to film, to a different medium, especially looking comics to film. And the big one, let me mention this really quick. He mentioned Batman Year One. And he said, and I don't know how he got this idea, because I did a review of that with Eric when it came out, and Eric and I both said that we kind of thought that it was actually a little bit too close to the comic book, that it was doing things that worked great on the page and were utilizing comic book storytelling that just didn't translate to screen. If you haven't read the book, you won't really know what it's doing. Some of the style was kind of lost and wasn't translating right. And anyway, he seemed to think that I thought that was an example of one that's great translating directly. And that was actually the big thing I didn't like about it. And so that's the big movie I would point to when I say I'm not sure that's ever a great idea. That sometimes there are things that you have to move away from because there's a big difference between doing, you're telling a story on a page versus telling it on screen.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I have a couple that I'd like to just point out real quick, but first I'd like to say this. No, I'm kidding. All right, you ready? I got a couple. I'm thinking Origin. Yeah, I know we already had a Wolverine Origin movie, but it was garbage, and I think Origin could potentially fill its shoes. I mean, do something better. I mean, Origin was great. I will say that maybe the potential downfall of Origin is that some of these things, including Origin, were serialized and maybe will not translate to film as well as they want it to.
But it's at least short enough.
Yeah, it's written as a whole piece.
Yeah, but also isn't like 36 issues or something.
Yeah. You got one?
I would. I'd say I'm trying to think of stuff because a lot of things that I love are just too long. Yeah. Obviously, my big thing that I always wanted to see live action on screen was Death of Superman, but you can't do that whole story without making it a trilogy or something. Because I'd still want to see the Reign of the Superman thing. I don't know that I would want to see a movie that was just and Superman dies at the end. Have fun, everybody. Bye. Be sure to throw your popcorn container in the receptacle as you leave. So I don't know how well that would work. Well, my favorite stories. I mean, in Nightfall, No Man's Land, my favorite stories are really big, long form story. Walt Simonson's Thor. Some of Claremont's X-Men. Although I still think that Dark Phoenix, done closer to the page, could have been great. I just don't think that you could, again, translate it exactly directly. A lot of people think that Daredevil Born Again would make a really great movie. That's actually that was actually what was being talked about for a reboot for a while. But now that Marvel's got the license back, who knows what they'll do. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'd like to see Kingdom Come. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, well done. That'd be really great. Kingdom Come would be cool. Let me ask you this: would it not be neat? This is neither here nor there, but would it not be neat since we're getting the Superman Batman movie? We're probably going to get Justice League. That seems inevitable. I think it'd be neat to do kind of an Elseworlds alternate history sort of movie.
Yeah,
that'd be a great thing that DC would have over Marvel, because Marvel hasn't done like a what if thing or anything like that yet, and that could be the big thing that their cohesive continuity could attempt, that the comics do all the time that we've never seen a movie continuity do. That could be neat.
They could do but something like, not necessarily directly from the page, I don't know, I've not read it, Gotham by Gaslight. I mean,
Gotham by Gaslight would be wonderful, and that's the thing, is that those sorts of stories are short enough that you don't have to worry about losing a whole lot of what's on the page, and you could also like embellish a little bit and build them up a little bit.
Yeah.
Some things are short enough and not that they don't really warrant a full, hour 45, 2-hour movie. This isn't a comic book, but my go-to example for that is How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Just not a thick enough story to try to figure out how to pad to make it an hour and a half long. Yeah. And that was the reason I never thought that movie really worked all that well. So you'd have to be careful about things like that with going with shorter things. I think Gotham by Gaslight would be a great thing to adapt for one of the direct-to-video animated movies, especially.
That'd be neat. I wouldn't necessarily
That's a great
mind.
pick, man.
I wouldn't necessarily mind if they chose like 2 things and then build it as one major live action feature.
Sure.
Like, guess what, guys? You're getting Gotham by Gaslight, and then you're getting Speeding Bullets or something, whatever. It's all one movie. And
like the same guy is going to play Batman, but in 2 different continuities or something.
It'd be kind of
fun.
Neat.
That's really a cool idea. I just don't think that those sorts of adventurous... I don't think that those sorts of adventurous, like experimental things are going to really ever happen.
No, they likely won't. I mean, they try things with animated stuff. I mean, of course, that Superman Shazam was not entirely Superman Shazam.
No, but it was cool.
It was cool. Superman Shazam was fun. It wasn't particularly deep, but it was fun. And then they had other things like... the Spectre thing was largely off the page from the Jim Aparo stuff that came out a while back, which I forget what comic line those were from. But anyway, I would say that one because it's so fun and clever, but, largely clever ways to destroy someone, very Theseus-like, but it doesn't translate to screen as well as it did single issues. I mean...
Yeah. Another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people's favorite stories, especially big event kinds of things, are things like Infinity Gauntlet and stuff like that, are about a pre-established continuity that build on a lot of very complicated, sometimes convoluted stories that have already come before. And you can't directly translate those because you have to do things that can bring the audience in. For instance, I would like to see something done with... Again, this would be a great thing to adapt for an animated movie, but even live action, it could work. I'd like to see something done with Identity Crisis, but Identity Crisis, you'd have to somehow lose some of the baggage of the backgrounds of all those characters.
Yeah,
because you'd spend too much time developing them.
Well, that's where I gotta agree with you, is that there's sometimes things that are in comics don't lend themselves to things that would be in movies. Like Claremont may have a good idea, but nobody's going to shove his words into the big screen. It'll really slow down the pacing of the film. So you find ways to paraphrase, you find ways to work around stuff, and you
find ways to contemporize language.
Yeah, I do think there are ways, or that there are good reasons to adapt source material. I don't think that things necessarily need to be 100% the way they were. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with the whole McFarlane idea, where if you're going to tell a story in a different medium, why tell the same story? I understand that. I can sympathize with that. I just don't necessarily think that that's 100% the way it ought to be.
Okay.
So you can have... Sometimes it's fun to have a story that's adapted. Sometimes it's fun to see something, how somebody puts something on screen, because there's things that actors can bring to a role that a writer hadn't intended. So sometimes these things are neat to see.
Yeah, and honestly, I used to take up for that position a little more than I do now. Again, from a creative standpoint, I can see that. On the other hand, I also sympathize with, being a reader and a consumer, I sympathize with that position also of not everybody reads comic books, and not everybody watches animation, etc. And so Sometimes adapting something as closely as you can makes a lot of sense because you're delivering it to an audience that is interested in the story but not the old medium. And so when you say something like, I don't want to tell the same story over and over again in different mediums, the thing that you forget is that it's a delivery system. It's getting it to people that wouldn't have otherwise gotten to see it, and I'm not going to go so far as to say that you necessarily have like a responsibility to make sure that that's done like exactly 100% right to bring it to different people. On the other hand, I would like to think that there's a responsibility to at least do the source material justice, or at least do the spirit of the character justice, if nothing else. That's the most important thing. For instance, I don't feel like this is an obvious go-to thing, but I'll mention it anyway. I don't feel like people who didn't read the source material got to see the Black Costume Saga or the or anything resembling what Venom actually was. And I love Black Costume. I love Venom. And so it's sad that, like, you know, the masses got that stuff and they got a really sad inferior version. You know. Shoehorned in with a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, the inferior Spider-Man.
Oh, while we're talking about the third movie in a line, I mean, the Dark Phoenix Saga and the Mutant Cure being tossed into the same movie and then treated as wholly separate entities that were just kind of randomly inserted into each other.
Just to get it out there?
It doesn't make any sense.
Is it as important to get it out there as it is to do it in a compelling way?
Yeah, I mean,
right?
that's the thing. I feel like
like, don't do it at all if you're not gonna make it more of a compelling kind of thing. It'd be better to just tell an original story.
If you're gonna change something,
then to dumb it down. Yeah.
Don't dumb something. If you're gonna change something, what you gotta do is you gotta consider what the inferior parts of the original beast are. Love it for what it is. Watchmen, as much as I love it, a giant squid at the end being the alien, that's kind of silly. I think lots of people tend to agree with that. And I know that if there's...
You're preaching to the choir. I love the ending of the movie. So.
Yeah. And I like the way the comic book handled it, but, you know, just the fact...
But could you have done it on screen? Yeah.
Visually, it being a giant squid is not necessarily as intimidating as it could have been in a... I mean, think about that. Does it work in live action? And that's essentially where I think they were going with the movie, like it or hate it. But it's... Sometimes you got to consider something might not work on screen, and sometimes you got to consider things don't necessarily work in the original beast, even if it's good, the original material.
That's a great point. I think that as fans, it's really easy for us to throw the word source material around as like the Bible. As like the be-all, end-all, and so the fact that it pre-exists the new thing makes it perfect.
Yeah.
Like, we know what it is already, and so we're like these elitist fanboy people that can go into the movie and go, well, it better be exactly like this masterpiece. But was it a masterpiece to you before you found out it was being adapted? And I think sometimes it's not for people. I think sometimes it becomes this great thing, even if they don't think about it that way, even if it's subliminal. It becomes this great thing because now it's being adapted and they better get it right. But what does getting it right really mean? I think that if you can do it better, do it better.
Yeah.
You know? And again, the obvious go-to is Under the Red Hood. We got Judd Winnick coming back and rewriting his original graphic novel, his original comic book series, and making it better.
Yeah.
You know, in animation. That's fantastic. If you can do that, do that. The reason that movie is considered so great by a lot of fans is because he took a story that people didn't like and he made it likable. That's fantastic. So do those sorts of things. I complained in my rewind for Superman, Batman, Public Enemies that that story had a lot of flaws and a lot of silly problems on the outset, and most of the problems I had with the movie were in the comics.
Yeah.
So does the movie get a pass because it has to stick to the source material? No, make it better. You know, you've got an opportunity to not only present that story to an audience that didn't read the comics, but to present it better. Why not? You ought to do that if you can.
Yeah, you know, I had a literal argument with somebody about The Hobbit at one point where I said these dwarves are really just terrible people, largely because they're dwarves. They're not people. But because it's a different kind of race. They're not humans, they're dwarves.
Oh, okay.
Be better humans!
They're people.
Oh, sure, they're people. But then again, the trees would be people if we consider all races to be... Anyway. So, any sentient being is a person, we'll say that. Why not? But these...
I always thought it was racist in Star Trek that the humans call the other species humanoid.
Why are they so annoyed with humans? Anyway. That was dumb.
I was making an interesting point.
But, indeed. And I was belittling it for no reason at all. What was I talking about? Oh, having an argument with somebody about The Hobbit. Which, The Hobbit, the dwarves are just really awful people, quite a lot of it, and they don't really give any good reason for Bilbo to want to go. He just kind of goes, you know what, adventure sounds cool, and then leaves.
Yeah, that's what he does in the book.
And I said, that's really dumb, and it doesn't make any sense, so why is it that way? And then the person said, well, that's the way it was in the book. And I said, don't care. This is a different thing. Fix it. If you're going to make a 3-movie-long epic, you have time to fix things.
That's true. I do think that with something like that, you're somewhat expecting traditional narrative in something that was not that was not that. It's a little bit of a different kind of thing. I'm not especially prepared to make this argument because I'm not a big fantasy guy, but like those stories are told differently than the kinds of stuff I like. That's why I don't really care for a lot of sword and sorcery fantasy, but yeah, I mean that's kind of expected in that sort of thing. That's why it's not my bag.
I'll agree with that.
I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not character-driven stuff. It really is more about world building. So they really will have those sorts of conceits of just he wanted to have an adventure, so he went. I think that if they made him too complex and had a more of a great reason, I think a lot of people that like that stuff wouldn't have liked it. So I'm just saying that for some people, I'm agreeing with you in what I like, but for a lot of people that would not have been an improvement.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
So that's largely what
that becomes a taste thing, and it becomes an issue of genre fiction versus something that's trying to be both a genre and literary, which that's not.
Maybe this is paranoid. I do want to say this on this particular video since I unleashed the beast a minute ago. I just realized they don't just call it. I know little people is a politically correct term. But they do sometimes refer to people as dwarves. So in reality, people are dwarves. I was thinking about in Tolkien.
Everyone knows what you're talking
dwarves. About. Anyway.
Yeah, it's okay. Everyone knows what you're talking about.
All right, let's move on.
You mentioned Watchmen earlier. This is a really interesting case. I want to throw this out really quick because a lot of people, of course, before the movie ever got made, called Watchmen the unfilmable graphic novel. I am speaking as a person, and I said this when I reviewed it. I'm speaking as a person that actually really, really liked that movie. Watchmen is still the unfilmable graphic novel. We got a film. I like the film. It cannot replace the graphic novel. And I'm not sure that any good adaptation of something can really replace what came before it, because I do think that you're going to have an inherently different experience from one medium to another. You know what I mean? So even if it was exactly the same thing, it's not. And it couldn't be. Even if they did it word for word, you couldn't make Watchmen the same experience you had in the graphic novel. Yeah. Why? Because, this I think is one of the better examples. The reason is because the graphic novel was partly about the medium of comic books. A lot of the storytelling in that is about not only figuring out what sorts of things you can do with panels that had not necessarily been done before, what you can do with pacing, things like that, but it was also about the superhero comic. It was making some commentary about how we had perceived superheroes in this medium. I argued in my review that the movie tried to do that to a degree with film, and I sort of appreciated that, but it's not the same thing. It's really quite different. And so any way you slice it, you could do it word for word. You could make it a 9-hour movie. It would never be exactly the same thing because the experience is different.
I suppose you could have the original Night Owl or somebody just reading the book, the autobiography that's inserted into Watchmen, the graphic novel.
Yeah.
I suppose you could do that. You could find a way to contrive all of that to be put into the movie.
Yeah, my point is you could put all the material in there, but it would still not be a direct... It would be a direct adaptation, but it wouldn't be the comic book.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. You can't make a movie that is also a comic book. It sounds obvious, but... anyway.
Which, you know, I suppose you could say that would slow down the pacing of the movie.
Oh, it would.
In some ways, the pacing of the graphic novel wasn't even the important part.
No, in fact, that was always my greatest criticism of it, is that...
It is kind of slow.
And also not deliberately paced enough.
Yeah.
With the exception of maybe the issue of Dr. Manhattan's life from before he became Dr. Manhattan to after, because there is a lot of deliberate pacing there with all of the linear and non-linear storytelling that happens in that issue. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
So I would also like to see. I suppose based on what you said earlier, we can extend this to not just movie but live action film, and say that it would be cool to see Death of Superman the series. It'd be kind of neat to see like a movie series event on TV or a mini series on TV. That'd be neat.
Yeah, the difficulty you have is that you have a lot more pages in a lot of these stories than you have time to do just a movie of, or even 2 movies or a trilogy, right? And so, again, to get all the material in there, the majority, if not all, of just the stuff that happens without having to cut major scenes and things like that, and work things around, move stuff around, you need a TV show or a miniseries or something, and that just doesn't happen. And it would be really cool if it did. I mean, I guess maybe to a degree there's kind of some of that going on with Walking Dead, though I've not been watching that show.
I haven't been watching since the mid-season break, but
so I don't know. So what I'm saying is I don't know how much direct adaptation of the comics happens in that show.
A lot of it's been changed. A lot of it's similar, but it's not exactly the same. Things don't happen in the same order.
Yeah.
Some characters die earlier in one than they do in the other, or not at all, or they were never around, or something to that effect.
But the reason I bring up Walking Dead, what's interesting about that is that that could have been a movie, and they were smarter to make that a serialized TV show.
Oh, I don't even think that could have been a movie. I feel like you could have made the saga of Rick and, I forgot his name. The other cop. Hokey Smokes, Batman.
I don't know Walking Dead.
Anyway, whatever that guy's name is, I feel like you could have made that a movie, but a lot of it is just, so much of it just bleeds into the next story, and picking out one definitive story arc from Walking Dead is extremely hard.
Yeah.
But,
well, I mean, I don't think it could be done. It could have been done well. I guess what I mean is it would have been really easy. It's really easy for me to see some Hollywood big shot picking that up and saying, "Let's make a movie," and just really gutting it. Earlier, that's what I meant. Is it would be more likely made. Earlier when I said that we need to not dumb this stuff down, what I mean is not making it like less intellectual than it was. What I'm talking about is taking the guts out of it.
Yeah.
Sucking out the meat so that the events kind of happen, but they don't mean anything anymore. You and I have talked extensively about how that happened with Rise of the Silver Surfer and stuff like that, where just so much of the meat of Silver Surfer and of the mythology of Galactus and that sort of stuff is ripped out, so that all you really have left is the ideas. Mm-hmm. And I would rather read a book. I would rather read an encyclopedia about that stuff and imagine how cool it was, and see a movie that just doesn't even go there with a lot of things. You know what I mean? I think I'm thinking of other things that are like big, long, epic runs of something, or like Walking Dead that is an ongoing series, but isn't so long that like there's just what I mean is that there's not like a million adventures like Batman, but one cohesive narrative, or not cohesive, but one like ongoing narrative that just keeps going. We haven't seen a lot of those sorts of things adapted. I would love to see Y the Last Man, but it couldn't be a movie. It's just too long. There's too much in it. It's 5 trades. There's too much in it. So that would be a great miniseries. And I would love to think that Walking Dead could pave the way for some of these things getting big budget seasons, but with definitive decisions of when to end them from the very beginning. I also think that like Netflix and Amazon original series getting made now, there's a lot more room now for these more finite shows that they don't have to keep trying to make go on forever and ever. Breaking Bad is that way. Not that it's one of those, but I mean, like, you know, it's a series that wasn't meant to go on forever. Right. Lost was that way too, but it arguably maybe went on a little too long. And then, but like something like something like Why the Last Man, you greenlight that, you say it's going to have 3 seasons or it's going to have 5 seasons, you know, but it's going to get cut off. So it is a TV show. It's not just a miniseries, but like Babylon 5, we had a decision from the beginning of when we wanted to end it.
Right. I loved Preacher. I thought Preacher was a heck of a comic book. I thought, and there's like 9 volumes worth of material available if you don't include the covers trade that they made, but that's great. And I keep hearing that sometimes we're gonna make a movie, and then they decide not to. Why? Because that's the right decision. So you could make the first book into a movie, sure, why not? But that's kind of like just wetting the whistle of somebody, and that not give. It's like dangling a donut in front of a starving man. That's not fair. And furthermore,
that's not fair. I love donuts.
Yeah, and starving people need love too.
And donuts.
And starving people need donuts, which actually might kill them if you give a starving man a donut. You might try to start with something that's... Anyway, but a little less rich. But Preacher is not something I really want to see live action. I just don't.
Okay.
And the reason being is that some of it I feel like they would most likely censor, because it gets away with a lot of really risque or disturbing stuff. And if you were to put this into a movie, this might get a rating that would make it not carryable in movie theaters. And if you were to make it into a TV show, nobody but one of the movie channels would be able to carry some of this stuff, because it's kind of gross and it's a major part of the comic.
Yeah.
So you have one of 2 choices, and neither of them are ideal.
Yeah, so, and I think there might be some things that just simply work in the medium they were told in, and there's really not a good enough reason to adapt them.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing about comics is that you can put suggested for mature readers on the front, and then it's just kind of assumed that there's stuff in there that is not appropriate for kids, and if it's not appropriate for you, you're going to put it down.
Yeah, and you can do anything you want in there, and you don't have to worry about a huge mass audience all seeing it at the same time. It's a little different for people when they see some of that stuff happening to real people as opposed to drawings on a page. I don't know what that is, but you know, at the same time, and I don't agree with this, but at the same time as adapting comic books into movies validates those characters for a lot of people who don't care about comic books, but now they get to see those characters, and so now they matter to them. They get to see them in live action. They care. It's also dangerous sometimes to do that with the more really raunchy or really risque sorts of things. I'm not saying I have any problem with it if people want to make those things and certain people want to see them. Everyone has their own taste. I just mean that at the same time as that validates things for some people, it's also going to upset people more than the comic book would have.
Yeah. And I don't know. There's just some things that I don't necessarily need to see in film. I mean, maybe it's because I can kind of compartmentalize. Maybe that's kind of your point. Maybe it's that the nation can compartmentalize and say, well, it doesn't matter if this is happening to a drawing or to a CGI representation of a person in a video game. And you can look at that stuff and say, well, that's not really happening. That's that's beside the point.
This is either here or there, and there might be a video in this, honestly, Vince, talking about the kinds of places that actors have to put themselves in to do these really uncomfortable sorts of scenes. I'm thinking of things like rape scenes, or scenes where children get killed or hurt or God forbid tortured. Things like that. The sorts of things that I'm not even comfortable talking about.
Yeah.
I think part of it is it's difficult for me as an audience member sometimes, and I guess I think more about production than a lot of people do. Some people can get just totally caught up and lost in a story, and they're seeing the characters and they're not thinking about the actors and the production. But when I see certain things, I have a difficult time not thinking to myself, how difficult must it been for that actor to have done this, and how comfortable were they doing it? Was this something that they were for, or did they do it for a paycheck? Sometimes I wonder about that when I watch things.
Yeah, sometimes especially things that are not exactly the top Hollywood movies, when some of these more risque things, or maybe more especially things that are sexually brutal. That's just uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable for me too.
And Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, not a bad movie, but it's just
I never saw that.
It's hard to watch at points, and that's a discussion that people have had a million times. But it's not bad. I think you would appreciate it. It's okay. But it's not something you'd want to watch with either your wife or your kid, I don't think.
No, of course. And I've heard that, yeah. I mean, sometimes the question really just comes down to even if there is a good point, or the story is worth telling. Is it worth telling enough that it was worth having to sit through certain things, and that's just a decision that everybody has to make for themselves. Not every piece of entertainment is really meant to be entertaining. Sometimes things are made more to make us feel about something, or to make observations about people and about society, and reminding us, hey, you might have rose tinted glasses, or you might live in your own little world, but these are things that happen.
Yeah. And not all art is necessarily supposed to be entertainment.
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, is that...
and there's experimental things that are just there just to see if we can do them. Yeah.
There are sculptures that are certainly repulsive, but say something about humanity or the condition of existence or whatever. So, yeah.
Well, everybody thanks as always for watching Geeks Not Nerds, and if you have a idea of something you'd like us to talk about in a future video, be sure and leave that in the comments, and also let us know what you think about the nature of source material. We were talking about comic books, but of course really this goes with just about anything. Do you think it is possible to, or a good idea, to directly, word for word, 100%, take something from the page, put it on screen? Leave your comments, let us know what you think. And thanks again. Appreciate you watching. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Vince. Reminding you to support your local comic book store.
Forgot we did that.
Me too. I was like, wait, are we still doing that?